My son Mark's 30th birthday was supposed to be a landmark, a joyous celebration of the man he'd become. The party was held at the sleek, ridiculously expensive downtown Chicago restaurant that his wife Tiffany had insisted upon. She had a flair for the dramatic, for showcasing a life we couldn't have afforded without a little, or rather, a lot of help. My help, as I stood there, nursing a glass of champagne that cost more than my weekly groceries. I watched my son mingling, his face lit with happiness, and for a moment, that was enough. It was always enough. Seeing him happy was the dividend on my investment of love, time, and yes, money. The air was thick with the scent of truffle oil and expensive perfume. Laughter echoed off the minimalist concrete walls. I felt a familiar pang of pride watching Mark. He had my late husband David's easy smile, and his tall, sturdy frame. He was a good man, a kind soul. I'd raised him to be, but my gaze drifted to Tiffany, shimmering in a silk dress that I knew for a fact cost $2,000. I knew because the credit card alert had pinged on my phone just last Tuesday. She glided through the crowd, like a shark in couture, her smile bright but never quite reaching her eyes. I'd been a silent benefactor in their lives for years. It started small, helping with the security deposit on their first apartment. Then came the down payment on their sprawling Lincoln Park condo, a wedding that belonged in a magazine, and the seed money for Tiffany's boutique marketing agency, a venture that seemed to produce more Instagram posts than actual clients. I did it all without question, because it made Mark happy. A mother's love is a powerful, and sometimes foolish thing. David, my husband, had been the pragmatist. Be careful, Helen, he'd warned me before he passed. Love should build them up, not prop them up. I'd dismissed his concerns as old-fashioned. I saw it as giving my son the start in life we never had. A small group of Tiffany's friends, women with identical sleek ponytails and expressions of bored superiority, gathered near the bar. Tiffany, holding court, saw me standing alone. She gestured for me to come over, that bright false smile plastered on her face. "Oh everyone," she called out, her voice carrying across the hushed chatter. "You simply have to meet Mark's mum." A few people turned, their faces a mixture of polite interest and curiosity. I smiled, stepping forward, ready to extend my hand and offer pleasantries. But Tiffany wasn't finished. She draped a possessive arm around my shoulders, the fabric of her dress feeling cold against my skin. "This," she announced with a theatrical flourish, "is Helen. She's the wonderful, wonderful lady who only knows how to pay for everything." The words hung in the air, sharp and glittering as shattered glass. A few nervous titters broke the sudden stunned silence. One of her friends let out a high-pitched, brittle laugh. I saw Mark across the room, his smile faltering as he registered what his wife had just said. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in his I saw a flicker of panic and shame before he quickly looked away, caught up in a conversation he suddenly found intensely interesting. He wasn't going to defend me. In that moment the entire room seemed to shrink, focusing into a single burning point of humiliation on my cheeks. Every expensive meal, every down payment, every bailed-out credit card bill replayed in my mind, not as acts of love, but as transactions that had defined my worth in their eyes. She hadn't just insulted me, she had publicly branded me. I was not a mother, not a grandmother-to-be, not the widow of the man who had built our family's foundation. I was an ATM, a sponsor, the lady who pays. I felt 100 different responses rise in my throat. I could have screamed, I could have listed right then and there every single dollar I had poured into their gilded life. I could have turned to her friends and said, "Yes, I paid for the dress she's wearing, the home she sleeps in, and the very champagne you're drinking, but I did none of those things. Instead, I took a deep, steadying breath. I felt the warmth of my late husband's wedding band on my finger, a solid, grounding presence. David was a man of quiet strength. He never raised his voice, but when he spoke, people listened. He believed true power was never loud, and in that moment, I chose to be my husband's wife. I smiled, a small, tight, unreadable smile. I gently removed Tiffany's arm from my shoulder. "It's so lovely to meet you all," I said, my voice even, betraying none of the acid churning in my stomach. Tiffany is such a character. She looked momentarily thrown off by my non-reaction. She had expected tears or a scene. She wanted a drama to validate her cruelty. I gave her nothing. The guests, unsure how to react, offered weak, sympathetic smiles in my direction. They looked at me with pity, and that was almost worse than the insult itself. They saw a weak, downtrodden old woman being trampled by her glamorous, vicious daughter-in-law. They were wrong. Tiffany was wrong. She thought she had put me in my place, reduced me to a function. She didn't understand. She had not silenced me. She had awakened something within me, a part of me that had been dormant for a very long time, buried under years of selfless, unconditional love. As I walked away from that little group, back to my solitary corner of the restaurant, I wasn't plotting revenge. Not exactly. I was formulating a lesson in value, in respect, and in the crucial difference between a gift and an entitlement. She had fired the first shot in a war she didn't even know she was declaring, and my silence was not surrender, it was the calm before the storm. The days following the party were shrouded in a thick, cloying silence. Mark called me the next afternoon. His voice was strained, laced with a rehearsed-sounding guilt. "Hey, Mom, I just wanted to say sorry about last night," he started, the words tumbling out too quickly. "You know how Tiff is. She has a weird sense of humor. She was just trying to be funny. She didn't mean anything by it." "Didn't she, Mark?" I asked, my voice flat. I was watering the orchids on my windowsill, the Chicago skyline a gray, indifferent backdrop. "No, of course not. She loves you. She thinks of you as a second mother," he insisted. The lie was so blatant, so flimsy, it was almost insulting. "She feels terrible about it, really." I waited for him to say that Tiffany would call to apologize herself. The silence on his end of the line told me that wasn't going to happen. Of course not. Apologizing would require admitting fault, and in Tiffany's world, she was never at fault. "Well," I said, my tone deliberately light, "tell her not to worry about it. It's forgotten." "Oh, great. Thanks, Mom. You're the best," he said, the relief in his voice palpable. He was off the hook. He didn't have to confront his wife or navigate any real emotional conflict. He could go back to his comfortable, well-funded life. The call ended quickly after that, with vague promises of having me over for dinner soon. A dinner I knew would never materialize, unless they needed something. And just like that, the incident was swept under the rug. Or so they thought. For me it was a seed. A cold, hard little seed that had been planted in the pit of my stomach, and with every passing day of their dismissive silence, it began to sprout. The final straw came about 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in my home office, a room David had built with custom cherry wood shelves, filled with his law books and my collection of first edition novels. It was my sanctuary. My phone buzzed with a text from Tiffany. No greeting, no small talk, just a link to a travel website. Below it a message. "Mark and I are absolutely burnt out. We need a getaway. Thinking of a 2-week tour of Tuscany. The first-class flights and hotel package are on a special offer if we book by Friday. It's a steal. Let me know when you can transfer the funds." XO. I stared at the message for a long, long time. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Let me know when you can transfer the funds. Not would you be willing to help, not we were hoping you might contribute. It was an instruction, a demand, as if she were texting her assistant. She hadn't spoken to me since the party, hadn't offered a word of apology, and now she was demanding a 5-figure vacation. That was it. The seed of resolve that had been planted at the party bloomed into a forest. I didn't reply to the text. Instead, I stood up and walked over to the large oak filing cabinet in the corner of my office. It was where David had kept all our important documents, meticulously organized. I hadn't opened the bottom drawer in years. With a deep breath, I pulled it open. The silent audit began. For the next 3 nights, after the sun had set and the city lights began to twinkle, my office became a war room. I brewed pots of strong black coffee and worked my way through a decade of financial support. I printed out bank statements, credit card bills, and copies of cashier's checks. I laid them out on the large mahogany desk, the sheer volume of it staggering even me. There it was, in black and white, the $150,000 wire transfer for the condo's down payment, the $75,000 check to Tiff's Boutique Marketing, LLC, the recurring $5,000 monthly payments to their joint account, which I'd set up to help with their mortgage and bills, the charge from a dealership for Mark's $60,000 SUV, the endless stream of charges from designer boutiques, high-end restaurants, and luxury spas, all on the emergency credit card I had given them. The total was obscene. It was a number that made my breath catch in my chest. It wasn't just the money, it was the story the numbers told, a story of escalating entitlement and diminishing gratitude. The first few years, there were thank you cards, emails with photos attached, then just brief texts of acknowledgement. For the last 2 years there had been nothing, just the expectation of more. As I sifted through the paper trail of my own generosity, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The hurt was still there, but it was being replaced by a cold, clear anger. Not a hot, impulsive rage, but a methodical, focused one. I wasn't just the lady who pays. I was the CEO of their entire lifestyle. And the board of directors, meaning Tiffany, had just shown me the ultimate disrespect. It was time for a corporate restructuring. Then I found the most important file. It was a thick blue folder labeled North Lincoln Park Condo Trust. My husband David was a brilliant lawyer, but he was also a man who understood human nature. When we decided to help the kids with the condo, he had been adamant. "We will not put it in their names, Helen," he had said, his voice firm but kind. "We'll set up a revocable trust. We'll be the grantors, you'll be the trustee. They can be the beneficiaries, live there rent-free, feel like it's their own. But you, and only you, will have control. It protects the asset, and it protects them from themselves." At the time I thought it was overly cautious, even a bit cynical. Now I saw it for what it was, the wisest, most prescient act of love he could have ever conceived. I pulled out the trust documents. My hands trembled slightly as I read through the legal jargon. It was all there, just as he had said. I was the sole trustee. I had the power to amend or even revoke the trust. The condo, their beautiful status symbol home, was not legally theirs. It was mine to control. Tiffany's entire kingdom was built on a foundation that I owned. This was the secret. This was the power she didn't know I had. The next morning I made a phone call. "Peterson, King and Associates. How may I direct your call?" "I'd like to speak to Mr. Peterson, please." "This is Helen Gable." Arthur Peterson had been David's law partner and our family's lawyer for 30 years. He was semi-retired now, but he still handled a few long-standing clients. Helen, what a pleasant surprise. His warm, gravelly voice came through the line. It's been too long. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Arthur, but I need to schedule a meeting. It's about the trust David set up for Mark. There was a brief pause on the other end. Arthur was sharp. He knew I wouldn't be calling about this unless something was wrong. Of course, he said, his tone shifting from friendly to professional. How's tomorrow at 10? The meeting in his quiet, book-lined office was clarifying. I laid it all out for him. The party, the insult, the text about Tuscany, the financial statements I had compiled. He listened patiently, his hands steepled under his chin, his expression unreadable. He looked at the trust documents, nodding slowly. David was a smart man, he said finally, looking at me over the rim of his glasses. He foresaw this, maybe not the specifics, but the potential for it. He leaned forward. Helen, you are on unshakable legal ground. As the trustee, you have a fiduciary duty to the trust itself. You can argue that allowing beneficiaries who are devaluing the spirit of the trust to continue unabated is a breach of that duty. You have every right to change the terms. What are my options? I asked, my voice steady. Many, he said. You could start charging them fair market rent. You could demand they begin buying the property from the trust if they wish to remain there. Or he paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. You could serve them an eviction notice and sell the property, returning the proceeds to the trust, which of course you control. I sat back in the leather chair, the weight of those options settling upon me. This wasn't just about money anymore, this was about reclaiming my dignity. Tiffany had reduced our relationship to a transaction. Fine, I would treat it as one. I left Arthur's office with a clear plan. My hands were steady on the steering wheel as I drove home through the bustling city streets. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't the weak, pitiable old woman from the party anymore. I was Helen Gable, the trustee, and it was time to call a board meeting. I let another week pass in silence. Tiffany's unanswered text about Tuscany hung in the digital air between us, a monument to her audacity. I imagine her patience was wearing thin, her frustration mounting. Good, let her stew in her own entitlement. I used the time to prepare, to fortify myself. Arthur Peterson had drafted the necessary documents, and they now sat in a crisp manila folder on my desk, feeling as heavy as a slab of granite. Finally, on a Thursday evening, I sent a text to Mark, not a group text, a direct message to my son. Mark, I need to speak with you and Tiffany about some financial matters. Please come to my apartment this Saturday at 11 a.m. It's important. The formality of it, so different from my usual come for brunch. Invitations was deliberate. I was setting a new tone. Mark replied almost instantly, "Sure, Mum, is everything okay? We'll discuss it on Saturday." I wrote back, offering no further information. Let them wonder, let them feel a flicker of the unease I had been living with for years. Saturday morning arrived, grey and overcast, the Chicago sky threatening rain. It suited my mood perfectly. I didn't set out coffee and pastries in the living room. Instead, I arranged 3 chairs around the large mahogany desk in my home office. My chair, the high-backed leather one that had been David's, and 2 smaller, less comfortable guest chairs facing it. On the desk, I placed the manila folder and a single glass of water for myself. This was a boardroom, not a family den. They arrived at 11 o'clock sharp. I could tell from the forced brightness in their greetings that they were nervous. Mark looked worried, his brow furrowed. Tiffany, however, had put on her armor of manufactured charm. "Helen, your apartment is always so gorgeous," she chirped, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. "I just love what you've done with the place." She was trying to placate me, to smooth over whatever she suspected was coming. "Thank you, Tiffany," I said, my voice neutral. "Please, come into the office. Have a seat." Their smiles faltered when they saw the setup. The formal seating arrangement, the starkness of the desk. This was not the cozy chat they had anticipated. They sat down cautiously in the two chairs, looking like schoolchildren summoned to the principal's office. I took my seat opposite them, the desk a formidable barrier between us. I took a slow sip of water, letting the silence stretch, letting their discomfort build. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice calm, measured. I looked directly at Tiffany. "At Mark's party a few weeks ago, you introduced me to your friends as the lady who only knows how to pay for everything." Tiffany's face paled. She opened her mouth to protest, to offer a flimsy excuse, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Please, let me finish. There's no need to deny it or explain it. Because you see, I've been thinking about what you said, and I've decided you're absolutely right." A look of confusion passed between her and Mark. This was not the reaction they expected. "Our relationship for a long time has not been one of family, but one of finance," I continued, my gaze unwavering. "You have treated me not as a mother, but as a bank. A bank with unlimited funds and no expectation of repayment. So I've decided to embrace the role you've assigned me. From now on, we will conduct our relationship as a formal business arrangement." I slid the manila folder across the desk towards them. "So let's have our first board meeting." Mark stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. Tiffany's eyes narrowed, her charming facade cracking to reveal the cold fury beneath. "What is this?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. "This," I said, tapping the folder, "is an audit. A summary of the financial support I have provided over the last 7 years. I took the liberty of compiling it." I watched as Mark opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first page, a detailed ledger of dates, amounts and purposes. I saw the color drain from his face. He flipped through page after page of bank statements, credit card bills, and copies of checks. The reality of his and Tiffany's lifestyle, funded entirely by me, was laid bare in indisputable black and white. "The grand total is at the back," I said softly. "Just over $1.3 million. Mark made a small, choking sound. Tiffany snatched the pages from him, her eyes blazing as she scanned the numbers. "This is insane. These were gifts. You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted, my voice still quiet but now edged with steel. "Gifts are given with gratitude and love. What I have received in return is expectation, and ultimately public humiliation. So the terms have changed." I leaned forward. "This is where we discuss the largest single asset, the condo." I pushed a second set of documents towards them, the trust agreement. "I don't think you've ever actually read this," I said. "This is the North Lincoln Park Condo Trust Agreement, drafted by my late husband. I am the sole trustee. The condo is owned by the trust, not by you. You are simply the beneficiaries, permitted to live there under my discretion as trustee." Tiffany's jaw dropped. For the first time since I'd known her, she was utterly speechless. She looked at the legal document, then at me, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. "I am officially informing you," I stated, the words clear and precise as a surgeon's scalpel, "that the terms of the trust are being amended. The era of free lodging is over. Effective immediately, all financial support from me will cease. The credit cards have been cancelled. The monthly bank transfers have been stopped." "Mom, you can't do this." Mark finally found his voice. It was pleading, desperate. "We'll be ruined." "No, Mark, you will be independent," I corrected him. As for the condo, I looked back at Tiffany, who was now trembling with silent fury. "You have 2 options. Option 1. You can buy the condo from the trust at its current fair market value, which is approximately $1.8 million. You have 90 days to secure financing. Option 2. If you cannot or will not purchase the property, you have 90 days to vacate the premises, after which the trust will sell the condo on the open market. The room was deathly quiet, the only sound the drumming of the rain that had begun to beat against the window pane. Tiffany finally erupted. "You malicious old woman," she shrieked, her voice raw and ugly. "You're doing this to destroy us. After everything we've done?" I asked, raising my eyebrows. "What, exactly, have you done, Tiffany, other than spend my money and mock me in front of your friends? You wanted me to be the lady who pays. Well, the lady who pays is now calling in her debts. This isn't personal, it's business. You taught me that." I stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "I believe that's all. You have the documents. I suggest you consult a lawyer, though I assure you, my position is legally unassailable. You have 90 days. The clock starts now." I walked to the door of the office and held it open. They sat there for a moment longer, stunned into immobility. Then Tiffany shot up from her chair, her face contorted with a hatred so pure it was startling. She stormed past me without a word, slamming the front door of the apartment behind her. Mark remained, his head in his hands. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, childish terror. "Mom, please." I looked down at my son, my heart aching with a complex mix of love, pity, and resolute strength. "No, Mark," I said softly, but with absolute finality. "The bank is closed." The explosion I had detonated in my office sent shock waves that rippled out immediately. The 90-day clock was ticking, a relentless metronome, counting down the seconds of their gilded life. For the first few days, I heard nothing. It was a heavy, loaded silence. I imagined the scenes playing out in that condo I owned. The panic, the accusations, Tiffany's rage, and Mark's desperate attempts to find a way out that didn't involve sacrifice or consequence. Their first move was predictable. About a week after our board meeting, I received a letter from a law firm. It was full of blustering legal threats, accusing me of emotional distress, breach of familial duty, and unconscionable manipulation. It demanded I immediately reinstate their financial support and dissolve the trust, signing the condo over to them free and clear. I simply forwarded it to Arthur Peterson, who responded with a crisp, 2-sentence letter of his own, reiterating the legal standing of the trust and my authority as trustee. He attached a copy of the original trust agreement with my late husband's and my signatures on it. Their lawyer, seeing he had no case, went silent. Checkmate. Their next strategy was to appeal to Mark's side of the family. My sister called, then my cousin. They had clearly been fed a heavily edited version of the story by a hysterical Tiffany. "Helen, what are you doing?" my sister Carol pleaded. "Tiffany is beside herself. She says you're throwing them out on the street over a silly joke." "It wasn't a joke, Carol," I said calmly, "and I'm not throwing them on the street. I'm giving them the opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet, an opportunity they have never had. They can buy the condo or find a place they can actually afford." I explained the full context, the years of entitlement culminating in that final public humiliation. By the end of the call, Carol was silent. "Oh," she finally said, "I didn't know all that." The biggest shift, however, was happening within their own 4 walls. Without my financial IV drip, their lifestyle began to crumble with astonishing speed. The first casualty was Tiffany's boutique marketing agency. Without my funds to cover the rent on her trendy office space and pay her 1 part-time employee, it folded in less than a month. The glamorous Instagram posts were replaced by a bitter silence. They couldn't get a mortgage to buy the condo. Their credit was abysmal from years of living beyond their means, and Mark's salary as an architect, while respectable, was nowhere near enough to support the life they'd been living or qualify for a $1.8 million loan. The reality of their situation began to set in, hard and cold. Their so-called friends, the ones who had flocked to their lavish parties, suddenly became scarce. The calls went unanswered, the brunch invitations dried up. Without money to burn, Mark and Tiffany were no longer interesting. It was in the second month that the cracks in their marriage became gaping chasms. I didn't have to imagine the fights. I got a front row seat. Mark showed up at my door one evening, looking haggard and defeated. He stood awkwardly in my foyer, refusing to come in. "She blames me," he said, his voice hollow. "She says I should have stood up to you, that I'm weak for not making you change your mind." "And what do you say?" I asked gently. "I don't know what to say anymore," he confessed, running a hand through his messy hair. "Last night she told me I was a failure, that she never would have married me if she knew I couldn't provide for her." He looked up at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "She meant provide the way you did, Mum. She never loved me. She loved the lifestyle." The dam of his denial had finally broken. He was seeing his wife, his life, with painful clarity for the first time. It was a brutal awakening, and my heart broke for him. But it was his awakening to have. "You're not a failure, Mark," I told him, my voice firm. "You're a talented architect. You're a good man, but you let yourself be propped up. We both did. I propped you up with money, and you propped up a marriage that was hollow at its core." That conversation was a turning point for him. He and Tiffany separated a week later. She moved in with one of her few remaining friends, still refusing to accept any reality where she wasn't the victim. With 30 days left on the 90-day notice, Mark came to see me again. This time he came into the office and sat in one of the guest chairs, but the dynamic was entirely different. He was humbled, but he wasn't broken. He looked lighter. "I've been looking at apartments," he said, "small one-bedrooms in Lakeview, places I can actually afford on my own salary." He managed a small wry smile. "It's terrifying, kind of exciting." He looked me in the eye, and for the first time I saw the man I had raised, not the boy who had been hiding behind my checkbook. "Mum, I am so sorry," he said, and the sincerity in his voice was absolute. "I'm sorry for taking everything for granted, for letting Tiffany treat you that way, for being a coward at my own birthday party when I should have defended you. I let you down." "We let each other down, Mark," I replied, my own eyes tearing up. "I thought my money was a form of love, but it became a crutch. I crippled you with it." We sat in silence for a moment, the shared acknowledgement of our mistakes healing something deep within both of us. The condo was sold 2 months later, as soon as Mark moved his things out. The proceeds went back into the trust, where they would sit, untouched, perhaps for a future grandchild, who would be taught the value of $1. The final scene of this drama wasn't explosive or grand. It was quiet. It was a text message from Mark a few weeks later. It was a picture of a key in the palm of his hand. The caption read, "Got the keys. It's not much, but it's all mine. Cooking my first real meal tonight. Thank you for everything, Mum, for the real things." I looked at the picture, and then out my window at the sprawling, glittering city. I had lost a daughter-in-law and a fortune, but I had gotten my son back. More importantly, I had gotten myself back. I was no longer a silent benefactor, a function, a walking bank account. I was Helen Gable, a mother, a widow, a woman of substance and strength, and my silence had spoken volumes, leaving an echo of self-respect that was in the end priceless.